Hello and welcome to Taylor Wimpey's How to Make Your Move.
We can't buy it, we can't sell. I honestly don't know what we'll do.
It's the biggest mistake I've ever made.
It just seems immoral and completely unethical.
This is just an attempt to dupe people into a very uncomfortable position.
What do we want?
Homes for Britain!
When do we want them? Now!
We all know there's a housing crisis in the UK. Not enough homes, with many priced out. To help Generation Rent become Generation Buy, new homes are going up across the country. But, new or old, are you buying a leasehold or freehold home? And do you even know the difference? It's a very old system.
Britain's first factory-made show house, prototype of the $500,000.
So what's the difference? If you're a freeholder, you just own your home outright.
We've got modern established period thatched.
Lounge.
But you can also lease your home to someone else. That's the leaseholder, who basically rents time on your land.
At this stage, anything's worth looking at.
In recent years, the number of leaseholds has shot up, and there are also more traps leaseholders can fall into. First up, new build developments.
So here's what's happening. A developer builds a house. Here it is. It sells that house to Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Here they are. But what it sold is the lease to that house. That's time in it. They haven't sold the ground it's on. That's the freehold, and they keep that. This is the crucial bit. A couple of years later, the developer is then able to sell the freehold, that's the ground that it's on, to an investment company. Here he is, Mr. Investor. It's a way of making money on the same house twice. And here's the other catch. Because it's a house and not a flat, the law says that the developer does not have to warn Mr. and Mrs. Smith that they're going to do any of this. And this whole business is worth hundreds of millions of pounds every year to the developers.
This is Ellesmere Port near Liverpool. It's a development like thousands of others across the UK. But the houses here are leasehold. The developers keep the freehold in order to sell them separately. So people living here are essentially living on ground which is being sold from underneath their feet, and they don't even know about it.
I had no idea that my home would be used as an endless income stream for an investor or somebody else's pension pot, because that's what it is.
Katie Kendrick bought her home from Bellway Developers. She was never told her freehold would be sold off. Now she wants to buy it. The price has gone from £4,000 to £13,000. Where do they get that figure from?
I have absolutely no idea. I've asked the company for a breakdown of how the freehold is calculated, the methodology to the valuation, to which they've failed to provide me with. They've said that I can either go with it, or if I challenge it, then I have to take on their legal fees to do so. They have said that I can come back with a counter offer, but without all of the information on how they calculate the freehold, how can I make an informed decision how to counteract their offer? So at the moment I just feel completely blind in a corner, and I don't know which way to turn next in terms of taking legal action, but you know, that's all very costly. It's been sold to this new company for 11 months now, and they've made, well, something that was worth 4,000 11 months ago, and now they're doing 13,000. They've made a considerable profit in less than a year, which puts further pressure on me, because now I'm thinking, if that's how much their investment has gone up within such a short time, you know, I need to move quick on this. Otherwise, you know, another year, 2 years, they could sell it on and on and on, and we could be talking ridiculous.
We asked Bellway to comment, but they didn't respond. Homeground, the company that acts on behalf of the freeholder, said its investors were UK pension institutions which bought the freeholds as part of their very long-term investment strategy. They said they were usually willing to informally negotiate a price which can often save both time and legal fees. In the rare event we cannot agree, it added, the leaseholder can use existing laws to force a sale. Lindsay bought her flat with Taylor Wimpey Developers. She was originally quoted £2,600 for her freehold. 2 years later, it had been sold on, and the price was £32,000. She feels too embarrassed to show her face. So you got a letter saying that the freehold was available?
Yeah.
But you decided at that time not to buy it?
Yeah.
And then later, what did you discover?
I rang them and said I'd like to buy it now, and they just point blank said it's not for sale. We've got a private investor who's bought it, so it's not for sale. We've got a long-term interest in your property. So I turned around and said, well, I've got a long-term interest in my property. It's my family home. It's my son's inheritance. It's not yours to just line your pockets every year with and be someone's pension fund.
What's been the impact on you of all this?
It's that fear of failure, that I feel like I've let everybody down because it wasn't right to buy it when it came. But nobody said this is a one-time offer. If you don't do it now, it's gone. And it's frustration and anger at the people. It might be legal, but it's not even questionable that it's immoral. And money talks. I can't afford to negotiate with these people. You're talking hundreds and thousands just to try and get a better answer.
What these developers are doing isn't illegal. Some of their buyers just don't feel they're very upfront about it.
Katie and Lindsay say that when they went to buy their homes, sales representatives didn't make much of an effort to explain to them the difference between leasehold and freehold. And in fact, they were told it was as good as buying freehold. So what we thought we'd do was go on Bellway's website, and it's not just Bellway that does this, but we thought we'd go on their website to see what mention they make. And the only thing I can find is this just very simple two-line distinction between what a freehold and a leasehold is. Nowhere on the website are they saying that they're planning on selling these freeholds on.
Taylor Wimpey say that as of this year, the vast majority of its new developments will be freehold only, but many other developers still do this. Beth Rudolph is from the Conveyancing Association.
You've had a little look at some of the paperwork. What has gone wrong here with regard to Katie and Lindsay in their purchasing of their houses?
So when Katie's obviously bought the house, from what it looks like, she's had the right advice from the conveyancer, but it would appear that the conveyancer was unaware of the intentions of Bellway to sell on the freehold. And you've got to have sympathy for the solicitors and any conveyancer in this position, because this is a new phenomenon. It's not something that has happened in the past, that developers would routinely be looking to sell on the freehold.
She came into the showroom, they sort of said to her, this is as good as freehold. But it quite clearly isn't. Isn't there an obligation on the part of the developer and also the solicitor who the developer recommended to tell her these things?
Anybody marketing a property is covered by the consumer protection from unfair trading regulations, which means that if there's something that would impact their decision-making process, then they should be advised of that before they view the property. And this is a really important point. The reason being that actually it's too late at the point that they've moved into the house and to find this out. They need to know before they view the property, before they've thought about where they're going to put their sofa and how the kids are going to get to school and all of that.
The next trap? Complicated clauses.
It's not just developers that leaseholders can feel trapped by. Luke Mosson bought his flat 3 years ago for £150,000.
He'd fallen in love with this Victorian building in Tunbridge Wells. Little did he know, he'd also fallen victim to a growing trend for clauses that hike up ground rent. That's the yearly fee a leaseholder pays to live on a freeholder's land. Luke thought he'd pay £250 a year, which is roughly what most people pay. But 6 months after he moved in, he got a bill for £8,000 instead. A small but important clause had been written into his contract by his freeholder, potentially designed to be overlooked by his solicitor.
On the face of it, it just seems immoral and completely unethical.
And you read the contract as much as you
I think I probably read the contract about 50 times, certainly after I realised, and it didn't matter how many times I read the one paragraph in which this clause is contained, I still can't read it.
The tenant shall be required to pay such annual rent as shall be £1 less than 2/3 of the rentable value of the premises.
That was the line that was missed.
That's the key bit.
No idea what that means at all.
Luke's freeholder is Martin Payne. He's certainly not the only person to do this, but we've been told about at least 20 similar cases where he's involved, and he's even been criticised in Parliament.
One crook, whether it's criminal or not is not for me to judge, is Martin Payne. with an E on the end of the pane.
Luke's solicitor had to pay Martin Payne £7,000 to remove that clause, but it didn't end there. Luke was left with what's known as a doubling clause, something that's become increasingly common in the industry. It states ground rent is £250 a year, backdated to 1990, which doesn't sound too bad, but it also says that that figure will double every 10 years. So by 2020, he'd be paying £2,000 a year, and it keeps doubling. By 2070, he'd be paying £64,000 a year, and by the end of the 190-year lease, there'd be over £65 million every year to pay in ground rent. In total, over the course of the lease, ground rent would have cost more than £1.3 billion on a flat costing just £150,000.
What's your feeling towards Martin Payne now?
It's not great, to be honest. He's caused me quite a lot of stress. I don't deal with him directly because everything goes through my solicitor, but I'm very aware that this clause was inserted into the contract when they extended the lease for no other reason than his financial gain. There'd be no reason he needs to do this.
You look at the wording of the clause, it is clearly constructed to deceive. What we say to all the members of the Conveyancing Association is make sure that if you're advising a client on these clauses, because they can be so tricky, that you run the calculation and that you are entirely sure as to what that calculation is. Because when you sit down with that and spend some time actually looking at it, it becomes very clear that this is just an attempt to dupe people into a very uncomfortable position.
What we've seen in a lot of these leases and contracts is this doubling clause, doubling of ground rent. Is that something that you see a lot of?
Again, this is a new thing, and if you think what doubling the rent every 10 years actually means in investment terms, it means that the rent will be going up by 7% a year. A guaranteed 7% return is pretty good in this market. And so this is what has created these new investment vehicles that are so interesting to, say, pension funds and other financial investors.
People like Luke freely enter into these contracts, and it's not unlawful. The allegation isn't that Martin Payne expects people to actually pay these ridiculous sums, it's that he's banking on solicitors to miss the clauses and pay him to remove them. We asked him for comment.
We are surprised to be contacted in regards to Mr. Mossam and his concerns, as we have recently agreed a settlement with his lawyer. In terms of the contracts used, these were drafted following professional advice given at the time. We have also tried to arrange a meeting with Sir Peter Bottomley MP to discuss the matters he raised in Parliament, but have yet to receive a response from him or his office.
Last up, extra charges. This is the issue millions will recognise. Freeholders charging for services and repairs that spiral out of control. That's what happened to Scott McCabe from London. Scott and his neighbours were charged £700 a year for gardening, and this is their garden.
Garden in the broadest possible sense.
Yeah, it's not very big, as you can see. I've lived here for 18 years and I don't think I've ever seen a gardener here yet, and they were charging us over £700 a year for gardening.
They were paying £11,000 a year to hire a doorbell system.
Each flat, it works out approximately £170 a year, so I was paying £170 for my little doorbell there that no one ever uses in today's world of mobile phones.
They were even paying hundreds of pounds for old light bulbs to be removed, but the council does that for free. So, Scott and his neighbours fought back. They used a law to force the freeholder to sell them the freehold, so now they run the block themselves.
We conservatively estimate that we were losing £40,000 to £50,000 a year in being overcharged for maintenance items which were questionable at best and maybe not done at worst. We decided that the only way this was going to end and that would to get these people out of our lives and off our back was to acquire the freehold, which I would recommend to any leaseholder out there to seriously consider that. The world changes once you're the freeholder. And that was the best bit of advice we ever got, because the world has changed.
Whether buying from a developer or a private freeholder, leaseholders can find themselves involved in expensive legal battles. It all comes down often to the kind of legal advice they receive. But with more and more leaseholds coming onto the market every year, campaigners say it's more regulation that's really needed.